Adora was left as a child by family who never came back. Mama Tika found her crying by the church gate and took her home. People clapped for Mama Tika then. They said she was kind. But time has a way of washing paint off a wall. Soon, Adora became the house help, the errand girl, the first to wake and the last to sleep. Every market day, Adora helped Mama Tika sell meat. She kept the table clean, washed the knives, and smiled at customers. She smiled even when her hands shook with hunger. She smiled even when Mama Tika hissed and said, "Faster, Adora. Use those hands God gave you." Adora's hands were strong. Her heart was stronger. One hot afternoon, a stranger came to their stall. He wore a torn brown shirt and carried a small hunting bag. His beard was rough, his feet dusty, his eyes quiet. He looked like a poor hunter who slept under trees. He asked for bones for soup, and Adora picked the best ones and added a small piece of liver for free. "Thank you," he said, surprised. "It's nothing," Adora replied. "Eat and be strong. The bush is not friendly." The man nodded. "My name is Jonah," he said. But that was not his real name. His real name was Jabari. He was a secret billionaire and the head of a quiet mafia family that moved like wind, felt but not seen. His father had been murdered months back. Since then, Jabari hid his face and his wealth. He wore tears like dust and kept to the bush. He trusted no one, not even his shadow. He stayed away from the city because many eyes were searching for him. But from the first day he saw Adora helping an old widow carry firewood without asking for money, he watched her. He watched the way she tied her wrapper, the way she said, "Thank you," the way she refused to keep change that was not hers. In a world full of lies, Adora felt like clean water. That same evening, a small fight broke out in the market. A lantern fell. A stack of dry cartons caught fire. People shouted. Traders ran. Smoke rose like a long snake into the sky. Someone shouted, "Water!" Someone shouted, "Adora!" and pointed at her as if she had pushed the lantern. Adora stood, shocked. "Me? I didn't touch it," she said, her voice shaking. But the market is a place where words run faster than truth. By morning, the story had grown horns. Mama Tika's meat had spoiled in the worry and rush. They lost money. Adora's stepfather, Peter, blamed Adora. He said she was careless. He said she had brought bad luck to the house since the day she stepped in. He said all this while drinking his palm wine. Adora cried in the back of the house where nobody could see her. She scrubbed her face until it turned red, then went back to work. In Riverbend, tears were like rain. They fell, and the ground took them. Jonah stood under the tall mango tree by the market square and watched. He did not move. He did not speak. He only listened, and he waited. He knew pain. He knew danger. He knew the smell of a lie. What he did not know was why this girl's tears felt heavier than gunfire in his chest. The next market day, a man in a clean white dress came to the stall. His name was Mr. Lawson. He lent money to traders. People respected him because he gave loans. People feared him because he collected them like a hawk. Mama Tika owed Mr. Lawson for last month's meat. Now, because of the fire and the spoiled meat, she had nothing to give him. "Where is my money?" Mr. Lawson asked, tapping the stall with his pen. "Please, give me one more week," Mama Tika said, twisting her scarf. "The market fire spoiled everything." Mr. Lawson laughed without smiling. "The fire did not burn my records. One more week will attract one more interest." Peter stepped forward. "We will pay. Don't shame us here." Mr. Lawson looked around the stall, at the rusty scales, at the small pan filled with scraps, at Adora washing the table. His eyes slowed on Adora. He nodded to himself, then spoke softly. "There is another way." Adora's heart skipped. She turned her face away and scrubbed harder. "What way?" Mama Tika asked, hungry for any rope. "There is a hunter in the bush," Mr. Lawson said. "Poor, but decent. He wants a wife. He cannot pay full bride price, but he will give a good sum. Enough to clear your debt and leave small change." Peter's eyes lit up. "Which wife?" Mr. Lawson let his pen rest. His eyes went back to Adora. "Her." The word dropped like a stone. Mama Tika did not shout. She did not gasp. She just looked at Adora as if a door had opened and fresh air had come in. "She is not our blood," she said slowly. "We picked her. We trained her. She has eaten our salt." Adora's breath came short. "Mama," she whispered, "I am not a goat." Peter snapped, "Go inside, girl." Adora stood still. Her step-siblings, Ruth and Daniel, watched with big eyes, eating roasted groundnuts and saying nothing. Customers kept walking by, choosing meat from other stalls. Riverbend was listening. Riverbend was pretending not to. That night, the house was heavy. Adora sat by the back door, looking at the moon. Adora thought of the day Mama Tika first brought her in and gave her Gary with milk. She thought of how she had run errands for the whole house. She thought of Ruth's fever she had cared for until morning, and Daniel's lost shoe she had found by the stream. She thought of all the times Peter had pushed her to the side when food was served. She thought of all this and wondered, is my life so cheap? In the morning, Mr. Lawson returned with the hunter, Jonah. He wore the same brown shirt. He looked poorer than a lizard in harmattan, but his eyes were steady. Peter looked him up and down and smirked. "So you want a wife?" "Yes," Jonah said. Mama Tika asked, "Can you feed her?" Jonah looked at Adora. "I will try. I am not rich, but I will try." Peter asked for the sum. Mr. Lawson named it. It was big enough to wipe the debt and leave something small for salt and oil. Peter's mouth softened. Mama Tika's eyes danced. Adora spoke, her voice calm but shaking inside. "Mama, please. I do not love him. I do not know him." Peter waved her words away. "Love comes after soup." Mr. Lawson smiled. "Elders can bless this afternoon. The hunter will bring kola nut. We will close the matter." Adora looked at Mama Tika, searching for one drop of love. "Mama, please." Mama Tika looked away. "Go and pack your small bag," she said. "Do not be stubborn." Adora's legs felt weak, but she walked. She had no fine clothes. She had no jewelry. She had a wrapper, one blouse, a small Bible, and a comb. She held them close and cried into the cloth so no one would hear. Outside, a drum started. It was not for joy. It was the drum of a deal. By noon, they gathered under the big Iroko tree beside the square. The elders came with walking sticks. The whole village came to watch. Peter grinned like a man who had just bought a new radio. Mama Tika tied a fresh headscarf and rubbed powder on her face. Adora stood apart, small and quiet, like a candle left in the sun. Jonah came with a small bag. He brought kola nut and dry gin for the elders. He bowed. He greeted well. He did not speak more than he needed to. The elders cracked the kola nut, prayed for peace, and took a sip. They asked questions. "Do you, Jonah, accept this girl as your wife?" "Yes," he said. "Do you, girl, accept this man as your husband?" Adora opened her mouth, closed it, then spoke. "No." A hush fell. Peter stepped forward. "She is shy," he said quickly. "She accepts." An elder frowned. "A girl's mouth is her own." Mr. Lawson stepped in smooth. "The family has spoken, elder. The girl is under their roof. They decide." The elder looked at Adora, his eyes soft. "Child," he said gently, "do you have another house to go to?" Adora swallowed. "No, elder." He sighed. He turned to the group. "Let us not keep the son waiting." Jonah opened his bag and brought out the money. It was wrapped in a clean cloth. Peter counted it twice. Mama Tika looked at the numbers and smiled inside her eyes. The elder spoke a blessing, short and tired. Someone tied a small red thread around Adora's wrist. A few women hummed a wedding tune, but their voices were thin. It did not sound like joy. It sounded like a door closing. Adora looked at Jonah. He watched her with quiet pain. He had expected her to hate him, and she did. But he also knew what she did not know. He knew that if he left her in that house, the debt would bite again. He knew that Mr. Lawson had other plans for girls like Adora. He knew enemies from the city had begun to sniff around Riverbend, asking about a man named Jabari. He was running out of time. When the sun softened, Jonah turned to Adora. "We must go," he said. "The bush road is long." Adora lifted her bag. She did not look back. She thought, "If I look back, my legs will fail me." They walked past the stream. They walked past the shrine where red cloths hung on a stick. They walked past the school field where boys still kicked a plastic ball and shouted her name and laughed. As night came closer, the road narrowed. Adora shivered. Jonah removed his old jacket and offered it to her. She refused. He did not push. After a while, he placed it gently over her shoulders without touching her skin. "Take it," he said. "The night is not your friend." She said nothing, but she did not remove the jacket. They reached a small hut he used when he hunted. There was a mat and a small stove. He set water to boil and opened a bag of gari. He poured and stirred. He handed the cup to her with both hands, respectful. "Eat," he said. "You have not eaten since morning." She stared at the cup for a long time, then took a small sip. Tears touched the rim. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did you choose me?" Jonah looked down. He could not say, "I am Jabari." He could not say, "I chose you, because you are the only person I have seen in years who did not worship money." He could not say, "I am hiding from men who killed my father, and if they find me now, they will finish the story." So he said the only safe thing. "Because you are kind," he answered. "And I will not harm you." From far away, a dog barked once, then again. Jonah's jaw tightened. He went to the door and peered into the trees. He saw nothing, but he felt eyes. He closed the door softly and sat near it. Adora watched him. "Who are you really?" she asked. Jonah met her eyes. "A man with many reasons," he said quietly. "I will tell you when it is safe." Adora turned away, hugging her knees. "I am not a goat," she whispered again, this time to herself. The hut listened. The night listened. And in the dark beyond the trees, two shadows paused, then slipped away to carry a message. "The hunter has taken a wife." The next morning, Adora woke to the sound of birds. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw the small hut, the single mat, the hunting bag in the corner, and it all rushed back. She was married to a man she didn't know, taken from the only home she had ever known, whether that home had love or not. Jonah was outside sharpening his knife. When she stepped out, he looked up and handed her a cup of water. "Drink," he said. His voice was calm, but she could see he had not slept well. They needed to go to the stream for water, but the only path passed through the village square. Adora tied her wrapper tightly and followed him, but her heart pounded. She could feel it, eyes waiting, whispers sharpening. They had barely reached the market stalls when the first laughter came. "Look, the meat seller's stepdaughter finally found her match," a woman selling peppers shouted. Another added, "Hunter's wife! You'll be chasing rats for dinner soon." The women burst into laughter. Children ran beside them, singing, "Adora married the bushman. He will give her bush yam. She will wear no gold bangle, only raffia to dangle." Some women clicked their tongues and shook their heads. "Poor thing," they said, but their eyes were not kind. They were full of pity that cut deeper than insults. Adora kept her head down. She wanted to disappear into the ground. Jonah said nothing, but his grip on the water pot tightened until his knuckles whitened. One man, drunk from palm wine, shouted, "Hey, Hunter! Did you pay for her with rabbit skins or with monkey tails?" Laughter roared. Adora's chest burned with shame. She wanted to defend herself, to tell them she had no choice, but her voice felt locked in her throat. She walked faster, her bare feet kicking up dust, her ears burning as the laughter followed them all the way to the stream. The insults from the market still clung to Adora like smoke from a bad fire. Even after she washed her face and hands, she could still hear the laughter in her head. Later that evening, the hut felt heavier than usual. Jonah cooked yam with palm oil and pepper. He placed a steaming bowl before her, then sat down across from her. Adora lowered her head. "You shouldn't bother with me. I know you hear what they say about us." Jonah tore a piece of yam, dipping it slowly in the oil. "I hear them," he said quietly. "But I do not eat their words." She wanted to ask more, but she stayed quiet. She was not used to a man serving her food. Even though it was simple yam, he placed it before her like it was gold. She took a small bite. Hunger wanted her to eat more, but pride kept her movements slow. When they finished, Jonah rose, took his hunting bag, and slung it over his shoulder. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Hunting," he replied simply. But there was a flicker in his eyes she didn't understand. She watched him disappear. The crickets sang, but she felt the night was holding its breath. Adora woke to the sound of a bag being moved. She sat up and saw the loaf of bread, the milk tin, and the groundnuts. Her hands froze over the loaf. Where did you get this?" she asked. Jonah shrugged. "I met a trader in the bush road. He owed me for skins I sold him." Adora didn't believe him entirely, but she didn't push. She took the bread and began slicing it carefully, as though it was a treasure. She poured a little milk into a cup, mixed it with water, and shared it between them. "You don't have to share," Jonah said. Her eyes met his. "We share what we have. That's the only way it will last." The words hung between them like a soft cloth, covering the small space they both called home. The next morning, Adora decided to go to the market to sell some of Jonah's rabbit meat. She thought maybe if she worked hard enough, they could afford palm oil and a little kerosene for the lamp. Jonah didn't like her going alone. "The market is not always safe," he warned. "I'll be fine," she insisted, tying her wrapper tightly. When she reached the market, she found an empty spot near the yam sellers and laid out the meat. For a while, people came and bought quietly. But then, a familiar voice rang out. "Well, look who's selling bush meat now." Mama Tika's voice cut through the air like a knife. She was at her usual meat stall, with Ruth and Daniel helping her arrange the table. Ruth smirked. "Mama, is this not our old house girl? The one you gave to that hunter?" Daniel laughed loudly. "I told you she would be selling dead rats in no time." People began to gather, curious. Some laughed, others whispered. Mama Tika folded her arms. "Tell me, Adora, do you miss eating real meat? Or are you happy chewing bush bones?" Adora's hands trembled as she arranged the meat, pretending not to hear. But Ruth walked closer, her voice dripping with mockery. "Maybe she can't hear because her husband can't afford salt to season her ears." The laughter exploded. Adora's cheeks burned. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, but she knew any word from her would only feed them more. Then, without warning, a man in a dirty shirt walked up, pretending to buy. He waited until everyone was watching, then pushed her tray of meat to the ground. "Oops," he said sarcastically. "Looks like the hunter's wife can't even protect her goods." The crowd roared with laughter. Adora's knees weakened. She bent to gather the meat from the dust, her eyes stinging with tears. She heard Ruth's voice above the noise. "That's what happens when you marry nothing." She carried the dirty meat back to her mat, her hands shaking so hard she could barely tie the bag. Adora walked home from the market with heavy steps, her head down. The sound of their laughter was still ringing in her ears, the taste of humiliation still bitter on her tongue. She didn't know it, but she wasn't alone on that road. In the distance, a man in plain clothes followed quietly, keeping to the shadows. His name was Kamau. No one in Riverbend knew him, but he knew everyone. He was one of Jonah's men, sent to watch Adora every time she stepped out. She had never seen him, never guessed he was there, but Kamau had been following her for weeks. He saw the moment the man at the market shoved her tray of meat to the ground. He saw the look in Adora's eyes when she bent down to pick it up, hands trembling, cheeks wet with shame. He saw the crowd laughing like they were watching a play. Kamau's jaw tightened, but he stayed in the shadows until she was home. That evening, when Jonah slipped away from the hut, Kamau was already waiting at their hidden meeting spot in the bush. "It happened again," Kamau said. Jonah's eyes darkened. "Tell me, The man selling palm wine? He pushed her goods to the ground. The crowd laughed. She walked home in tears. Jonah's grip on his knife tightened. Where is he now? In the lower part of the village, drinking. Jonah's voice was cold. Make sure he never raises his hand to her, or any woman, again. Kamau nodded. Understood. By morning, the palm wine seller was gone. No one knew where. Some said he had run away in the night. Others whispered he had been attacked by spirits on his way home. It should have ended there. But Riverbend was a place where gossip traveled faster than truth. The story twisted as it moved from ear to ear. Have you noticed? A woman selling tomatoes whispered. The man insulted Adora, and the next day he disappeared. Another woman crossed herself. And the meat seller's scale was destroyed last week after she mocked Adora. Is that not strange? She is not just the hunter's wife, they said. She is a witch. They say she curses those who offend her. Better stay away from her stall unless you want your roof to fall in. By the time Adora returned to the market that week, the air around her had changed. Women moved their baskets when she walked past. Customers who once stopped to greet her now crossed to the other side of the road. Even the old yam seller, Mama Neni, who had always been kind, avoided her eyes. She sat with her small tray of meat, but no one came near. The space around her felt like an invisible wall. The only sounds were the whispers she wasn't supposed to hear. That's her. She'll smile in your face and then strike at night. Her husband must be under her spell. Her hands trembled as she cut a small piece of meat, trying to busy herself. The whispers were sharp enough to pierce her skin. That's her. They say she prays at night and people disappear. She cursed the palm wine seller. One man laughed bitterly. I hear her husband is not even human, a spirit in disguise. The market erupted with cruel chuckles. Adora's eyes stung, but she refused to let the tears fall. She sat until the sun began to set, the meat untouched. When she walked back to the hut, the road felt longer than it ever had. She heard footsteps behind her but didn't dare turn. In truth, it was Kamau again, Jonah's silent watcher, keeping a distance, making sure she reached home safely. He had orders to stay invisible, but his chest burned at the sight of her walking alone. Shoulders slumped under the weight of invisible chains. When she reached the hut, Jonah was waiting at the door. He saw the basket in her hands, still full. No sales? He asked softly. She shook her head. Not even one. They think I'm evil. Jonah took the basket from her and set it down. He saw the tears forming in her eyes, the way her lips trembled. Adora, he said gently. Look at me. She raised her eyes slowly. You are not evil, he said firmly. You are not cursed. You are not what they call you. You hear me? Her lips quivered as she tried to hold back a sob. Then why does it feel like I'm disappearing? Jonah's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, that every insult thrown at her was the shadow of his protection, that every whisper came because his enemies were near, and he could not risk them seeing her as a weakness, but to say it would put her in danger. Instead, he reached into his hunting bag and pulled out a small wrapped parcel. Inside was roasted plantain with groundnut, still warm. I got this for you, he said. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. When did you? Don't ask, he said with a faint smile. Just eat. She sat down on the mat, breaking off a piece. Will you eat with me? He sat beside her, taking a bite. For a moment, the world outside the hut didn't exist. But far beyond the village, two men dressed in city clothes questioned a trader about a hunter named Jonah. They left with no answers, but their eyes were cold. By morning, their path would turn toward Riverbend. And Jonah knew, though Adora did not, that the walls around their fragile peace were closing in. The market was already buzzing when Adora arrived the next morning. She carried a small basket of smoked fish Jonah had gotten from a friend, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she could make a few sales. But as she walked to her usual corner, a voice she wished she could forget sliced through the noise. Well, well, if it isn't my old house girl, Mama Tika called loudly, standing in front of her stall. Ruth and Daniel were beside her, grinning. The crowd nearby turned to watch. Mama Tika walked forward slowly, looking Adora up and down. "Hunter's wife," she said mockingly. "Tell me, how does it feel to sleep in a hut with a man who can't buy you even a plastic cup?" Ruth laughed, adding, "Mama, don't forget to ask if she still cooks bush rat stew." Daniel stepped closer, smirking. "Maybe she puts leaves in the soup now. Free seasoning from the bush." Laughter erupted. Adora's throat tightened, but she tried to walk past. Mama Tika wasn't done. "Wait," she shouted. "Before you go, tell everyone here, are the stories true? Do you curse people at night?" The market went silent. All eyes turned to Adora. Her lips parted in shock. "No, Mama Tika cut her off. "Oh, please. We all saw what happened to the palm wine seller after he touched your meat. And my stall? Destroyed a week after I scolded you. You can fool others, but not me." Whispers rose like a swarm of bees. "She's a witch. She's dangerous. Don't let her touch your goods." Adora's chest burned. Her hands shook so hard she almost dropped the bowl. I'm not a witch," she said, her voice trembling. Mama Tika smirked. "Then prove it. Stand here and let me sell my meat beside you today. Let's see who the customers choose." But no one came to Adora's side. People stepped away from her as though she carried an invisible sickness. The basket in her hands felt heavier than iron. The humiliation was complete. When Adora returned home, Jonah was sharpening his knife outside. He looked up and saw her empty basket, her eyes red from holding back tears. "Adora." "Don't," she whispered, walking past him into the hut. Jonah followed her in. "Tell me what happened." She shook her head, sitting on the mat. "It doesn't matter. I can't go back there, ever. They don't just mock me anymore. They fear me. They think I'm cursed." Jonah knelt beside her, his jaw tight. "You are not cursed. You hear me? They don't know who they're talking about." Something in his voice made her look at him sharply. "And who are they talking about, Jonah? Who are you, really?" His gaze held hers for a long moment, then softened. "I'm just a man trying to keep you safe." Safe. The words stayed in her mind long after he got up and left the hut that night. But Jonah didn't go hunting. He met Kamau in the shadows near the stream. "They're here," Kamau said quietly. Jonah's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Two men from Lagos, asking questions. They've already been to the yam seller and the palm oil trader." Jonah exhaled slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "Make sure they don't get near her. I'll handle the rest." The sun had barely risen when Adora heard a knock on the hut door. Firm, deliberate, not like the usual knocks from neighbors. Jonah was already up, standing near the doorway with his hunting bag. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood still, listening. The knock came again. This time, a voice followed. "We're looking for a man called Jonah." Adora frowned. "Who are they?" Jonah's tone was calm, but his eyes had turned sharp. "Stay inside." He stepped out, closing the door behind him. Two men stood outside. They wore city clothes, clean shirts, polished shoes, but their eyes were hard. They didn't look like traders or visitors. One of them smiled without warmth. "We've heard about you, Hunter. They say you're new here. Keep to yourself. But you're good at getting things done." Jonah didn't respond. The second man's smile faded. "We're looking for someone. Name's Jabari. We know he's here. We know he's hiding." Inside the hut, Adora strained to hear, the unfamiliar name echoing in her mind. Jonah's voice was flat. "Never heard of him." The first man stepped closer. "If you see him, tell him the debt for his father's life isn't paid yet." Something in Jonah's eyes flickered. Rage, quickly buried. "I don't deal in other people's debts," he said evenly. The men stared at him for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. Jonah stood there watching them until they disappeared down the path. Only then did he re-enter the hut. "They were looking for someone else," he said, as if brushing off a minor event. "Nothing to worry about." But Adora wasn't convinced. You looked like you knew them." Jonah picked up his hunting knife and avoided her eyes. "I don't know anyone like that." The next market day was hotter than usual. Adora hadn't wanted to go, but Jonah insisted she take some meat to try and sell. "It will keep you busy," he said gently, pressing the small bowl into her hands. She didn't tell him she already knew no one would buy from her. When she reached the market, the whispers began immediately. "There she is, the hunter's witch. Keep your eyes on your goods." Adora tried to ignore them, but then she saw Mama Tika, standing in her meat stall, smiling in a way that made Adora's stomach twist. "Well, look who's brave enough to come out again," Mama Tika called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me, how's life in the bush? Or have you started casting spells on your husband too?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ruth added from behind the stall, "Careful, Mama. If you insult her, she might make your roof collapse." A few market women giggled, covering their mouths. Adora gripped her bowl tighter and turned to leave, but before she could, 2 men stepped into her path. Her breath caught. It was them. The strangers from the other day. They looked around, making sure everyone was watching. Then one of them smiled cruelly. "We're just here to ask a question. Where's your husband?" Adora's heart thudded. "He's hunting," she said quietly. The man tilted his head. "Funny. For a hunter, he seems to know more about city business than bush traps." The other leaned closer, his voice dripping with threat. "Maybe you should tell him his old friends are still waiting." Mama Tika stepped forward, curiosity in her eyes. "Old friends? What are you talking about?" The first man smirked. "Let's just say your hunter isn't exactly who you all think he is." Gasps spread through the crowd. Whispers started immediately. "Did you hear that? He's hiding something. No wonder she's so strange." Adora's pulse raced. "Leave me alone," she said, her voice shaking. The man laughed. "Or what? Will your magic make me disappear too?" The crowd burst into mocking laughter again. Someone in the back shouted, "Careful, before she turns you into a goat." Before Adora could speak, a shadow fell over her. Jonah was there, silent, deadly still. His presence sucked the laughter out of the air. He didn't look at Adora first. His eyes locked on the 2 strangers, cold and unblinking. "You're far from home," he said slowly. One of the men's smirk faltered. "We're just here to talk." "You talked," Jonah cut in, his voice low but carrying enough weight to silence the market. "Now leave." The other man stepped forward, testing him. "Or what?" Jonah didn't answer. Instead, he took one slow step forward. The entire crowd instinctively stepped back, even those not involved. It was the kind of movement that carried unspoken authority, the kind that came from someone who had commanded fear before. The strangers exchanged a quick glance, then turned and walked away without another word. Jonah watched them until they were gone, then finally looked at Adora. Her eyes were wide, not just from the scene, but from the feeling that she had just seen a part of him no one else knew. Without a word, he took the basket from her hands and led her out of the market. No one stopped them. Adora kept her eyes on the ground as they walked, her face hot with shame. Every step away from the market felt like dragging a sack of stones. Jonah's grip on the basket was firm but gentle, his silence heavier than any words. When they reached the hut, she finally spoke, her voice low. "You didn't have to come for me." Jonah set the basket down quietly. "I will always come for you." She looked at him, searching for something in his face, but he turned away to hang his hunting bag. The air between them was thick, too many things unsaid, too many questions she was afraid to ask. By morning, Jonah had already gone into the bush. Adora decided to walk to the market for a small packet of salt. She told herself it would be quick. In and out, no time for trouble. The market square was almost empty. Only the late sellers and a few boys playing with a plastic ball were still around. The evening air was heavy. 2 men stepped out from the narrow path near the palm trees, the same city men. "Good evening, hunter's wife," one said, smiling like a blade. "Walk with us." Adora froze. "I'm going home." "Then we'll go with you," the other replied. "We want your husband to see our faces." From the far end of the square, a short, soft whistle cut through the air. Adora turned. Jonah was already walking toward them, calm but hard like a carved stone. His eyes went from the men to her, then back to the men. The taller one grinned. "There he is. We've been waiting for you, Jabari." The name landed like thunder. Adora's breath caught. She looked at Jonah. He didn't speak. More whistles answered from the dark edges of the square. Shadows moved. Men Adora had never seen before stepped out and formed a wide circle. They didn't shout. They didn't boast. They just stood. Still. Disciplined. Waiting. "Boss?" one of them said quietly. Adora heard it. "Boss?" The city men glanced around and lost their smiles. "You're hiding behind a village?" one muttered. Jonah's voice was quiet, but it carried. "You touched the wrong person when you touched my wife." No one moved for a long, long second. The boys stopped playing. Even the lantern flames seemed to hold their breath. Then the shorter city man tried to bluff. "This isn't your city, Jabari. You don't give orders here." Jonah took one slow step forward. The circle of his men tightened by a hair. "Leave Riverbend tonight," he said, "and never come near her again." The taller man's jaw jumped. He stared at Jonah, measured the men around him, then spat in the dust and backed away. "This isn't over." "It is," Jonah said. "For your sake." They left. The circle opened. The shadows melted. The square looked normal again, but nothing was normal. Adora was shaking. "Jabari?" she whispered. "Who are you?" Jonah looked at her, pain sitting heavy in his eyes. "Let's go home," he said softly. Inside the hut, the lamp burned low. Jonah sat by the door, as always, but his shoulders looked tired in a way she had never seen. "My real name is Jabari," he said at last. "My father was killed months ago. I inherited our family's work. It's not clean. It's not simple. People are after me. I hid here so eyes would leave me, so I could set a trap for the ones who killed him." Adora's throat tightened. "So you bought me to hide better?" His eyes closed. "At first, yes. I needed a quiet life, a wife, a roof, a routine that made me look small. I told myself it was to keep danger away. I told myself it would protect you too." She stared at him, hurt rising like hot water. "You chose me because I was easy to move. Because I was poor. Because no one would ask questions." "I chose you because you were kind," he said, voice breaking. "Because I saw you give bones and liver to a stranger. Because I watched you help an old woman with firewood when no one was looking. I thought I could keep my heart out of it." He swallowed. "I failed. I started to wait for your steps outside the hut. I started to think of what you would eat before I thought of myself. I started to breathe easier when you smiled. It stopped being a plan." Adora shook her head as tears spilled. "You should have told me. I wanted to be part of whatever plan my husband had. You turned me into a cover. You left me in the dark while people called me a witch. You let me carry shame alone." "I was trying to carry the danger alone," he said. "I thought silence was safety." "Silence felt like betrayal," she answered. She stood up, grabbed her wrapper, and walked out. Jonah didn't block the door. He just stood too, as if something inside him had become very old. "Adora," he said, "please don't walk the night roads." She didn't answer. She walked. The village was quiet. She sat on the flat stone by the river, and finally let everything out. Every insult, every empty day at the market, every small kindness that had confused her. She cried until her body shook. She cried until her chest hurt. Behind the trees, Kamal watched from a distance and did nothing. Those were his orders now. Keep the road clear, but let her choose. Footsteps came, software familiar. Adora, Jonah said gently. Don't, she whispered. I gave you my trust. You returned it with a plan. He sat a little distance from her, not touching, not reaching. You are right to be angry, he said. You are right to walk away. I deserve your silence. She turned to him with wet eyes. Then why did you follow me? Because even if you hate me, he said, I still must keep you safe. Something in her vision blurred. She opened her mouth to answer, but the world tilted. The stone slid away. She fell. Adora! Jonah caught her before her head struck the rock. He lifted her easily, heart banging like a drum. Kamau! He called without turning his head. The truck. Now. They drove to the town hospital. The tires ate the road. Jonah held her hand the whole way, whispering her name like a prayer. In the emergency room, a nurse checked her pulse, her breathing. A doctor came with gentle hands and calm eyes. Stress, he said after the first tests. Exhaustion. And she's pregnant. Jonah's breath left him. Pregnant? The doctor nodded. She needs rest, food, peace. Jonah sat by the bed through the night. He watched her sleep, and for the first time since his father died, he cried. Not loud, not long, just enough to wash the dust from his pride. When Adora woke, the room was soft and quiet. Jonah stood at the window talking into a small phone with his back turned. Not near the village, he said, low and firm. Shut down the route, block the port, pay the families we owe. If they come again, we end it clean. No fire in Riverbend, do you hear me? No fear near her. This ends now. He ended the call and turned. Their eyes met. How long was I out? She asked, voice small. Since last night. She looked at his face. It was tired but open. The doctor? Stress, he said softly. And we're having a baby. Her hand flew to her belly. A sob came out and turned into a laugh that broke in the middle. A baby? If you still want me near you, he whispered. She stared at him for a long moment. Did you settle what you needed to settle? He nodded. By the time you leave this bed, it will be done. I will not bring fear into your house again. I cannot change how we started. I can change everything after. Tell me everything, she said. He did. He told her about his father's murder, the vow he made over the grave, the people who depended on him, the debts he had paid in secret for traitors in the city, the men who called him boss, and the nights he sat by the hut door like a guard dog with a broken heart. He told her about the first day he saw her, the liver she added to a bone bag, the way he had said, thank you, and felt it scratch his throat like truth. He told her about every loaf of bread, every salted fish, every quiet apology he didn't know how to speak. When he finished, silence filled the room. Machines hummed. A bird tapped the window once. Adora wiped her face. You should have trusted me, she said. But I hear you. Can I earn you? He asked. She looked at her belly, then at him. Start by never lying to me again. I swear, he said. She nodded. Then sit. Hold my hand. We will face the morning together. Weeks later, when the doctor discharged her, Riverbend saw a day it would never forget. They remarried, properly, openly, in the field by the big Iroko. Drummers came from 3 towns. Elders sat under canopies. Women danced in wrappers that flashed like water. Jabari did not hide. He paid the bride price in full and then doubled it for the poor widows of the village. He asked for forgiveness where his silence had caused harm. At the gate of the hall, Mama Tika, Peter, Ruth, and Daniel arrived late, dressed like guests of honor. The guards at the entrance stood very straight. We're family, Mama Tika said, chin high. Open the gate. Your names are not on the list, the guard replied. We raised her, Peter snapped. The guard's voice did not move. You sold her. They were denied entry. The drum did not stop. The food did not pause. Inside, Adora's hand trembled in Jabari's palm. After the wedding, he moved her to the city. The mansion was wide and bright, with tall trees, a long fence, and guards on quiet patrol. There were cameras, but there were also roses. There were heavy doors, but there was also laughter. Adora did not change her heart. At night, Jabari walked the halls like a man who had finally put down a load. He still had work, but he drew a line around their home and called it peace. When their baby came, a girl with warm brown eyes and a sweet, stubborn mouth, they named her Hope. The first time Adora held her, she cried into the soft hair and whispered, "You are the proof that pain can turn into something good." Jabari stood by the bed, one finger under the baby's tiny hand, and said, "I will build our life on truth from now on." Adora looked up at him. "Then we are safe." He nodded. "Then we are safe." In the end, people learned what they always forget. Kindness is not weakness, and truth is not a luxury. A woman that the world laughed at became a queen in her own house. Not because of gold, but because a man finally chose honesty over fear, and a woman chose forgiveness without forgetting the lesson. And whenever the wind passed the stream at night, it sounded like a promise kept.